We're pretty much at the limit of borrowing at the moment.
You are supposed to be the servants of the people. The people are supposed to be your bosses. And to me, the people doesn't even realize that.
Good evening. My name is Ralph from St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
I'm going to say something that's controversial. CARICOM has gotten in its own way.
I want to be very clear that there is a dangerous tendency in our country.
This program is talk about the facts. We must bring the facts.
Time to face the facts.
Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. On this edition of the program, we are going to be looking at agriculture and in particular food security for the Caribbean region. How we're going to secure our food, our water, both food on land and in the seas. I have with me quite an informed and educated and knowledgeable panel in the field, and they're going to take us through the paces of how we can go about preserving our food and ensuring that we can feed ourselves now and in the future. So don't go anywhere, viewers. You just sit back and relax. We'll be right back after this short break.
Feel good facts.
Help prevent cold and flu by washing your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. That's the time it takes to remove most germs. No soap and water? No worries when you've got alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
Welcome back, viewers. We're so happy to have you with us as we look at this issue of agriculture, food security, water security. How are we going to feed ourselves? I'm your host, Beverly Sinclair, and I have with me a panel that knows this business a whole lot better than I do. And they're going to introduce themselves to us, and we're going to start with Mr. Ingraham.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Ingram. I usually work in insurance, but I'm a member of a farming cooperative here in the Bahamas. I have a passion for food security. I've also served for quite a while as a director of a food rescue service here, where we rescue food from restaurants and hotels and provide to persons in need. But agriculture is a passion of mine and something that I think we here in the Bahamas need to do a lot better job of taking advantage of.
I love that part about the food rescue. How does it work? How has it been going?
It's going very well. So we have this organization, Hands for Hunger. They have arrangements with the major hotels, with some of the restaurants. So, the local KFC franchise and Atlantis Hotel. Any food that they don't sell on a particular day, they call the Hands for Hunger guys, and the truck goes in. We have a truck, a refrigerator truck that goes in. The food is picked up. It's very nicely presented. Then we repackage it if necessary, and we take it out to places like the Red Cross, Salvation Army, a number of other children's homes or churches that have food feeding programs. Somewhere like Atlantis, if they're having a conference and they have a evening where they prepare enough for 3,000 people and only 2,500 show up to eat, then they have 500 people worth of food that they can donate, and that then goes to another organization that needs it. So it's something that has cut down on food waste here in the country. And it's something that at the moment, the organization serves about 20 food service organizations that are giving food to needy persons. So it's definitely made a difference in a lot of lives locally.
You should see about exporting that to the rest of the Caribbean. I really love that idea and love what you're doing. Mr. Matthias, let us hear from you. Why should our audience be listening to you? Tell us about your expertise.
Yes, good evening, viewers and fellow panelists. My name is Richard Matthias. I am a commercial beekeeper. I am also the president of a beekeeping organization in St. Lucia called the Ionola Apiculture Collective. And I'm also the president of the regional apiculture body, the Association of Caribbean Beekeeper Organizations. I'm a graduate of the Cornell University Master Beekeeping Program. And I have been a beekeeper for probably a little over 15 years. And I've worked with a lot of small NGO groups and international agencies, ICA, CARDI, Jeff SGP, UNDP. I've worked with them extensively with a lot of their projects in bringing apiculture to the next generation of beekeepers and trying to help also preserve our natural ecosystem across the Caribbean. Thank you.
Very good to hear that. You know, I know that people in Grenada would definitely put up a strong argument to say some of the best honey comes from Grenada. How do you find that competition among the islands that you represent?
Oh, well, Dr. Jessamy is one of my
Yes.
good friends. So we converse on a regular basis. I think all the Caribbean honeys have their own unique flavor and taste. And, you know, a lot of beekeepers throughout the Caribbean need to follow the torch, the path that Dr. Jessamy has lit for beekeepers in the Caribbean and following her path and get winning award-winning titles in similar competitions. I know Trinidad has done, some members of our organization in Trinidad have participated and won a number of medals at similar competitions in the UK. So it's all good for Caribbean beekeeping. We have a long history of going into the London Honey Show and winning. So just more of us need to go do it on a more regular basis.
Absolutely. Dr. Myers Morgan, a little bit about yourself, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Currently, I am the Principal Research Director with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries here in Jamaica. And I also I volunteer and a director on the Kevoy Community Development Institute. And the role of this institute is really as it relates to farm management, or at least facilitating farm management training and community development, not just for Jamaica, but for the region. And I guess why I'm here is to contribute significantly to the discussions with regards to, you know, some of the ideas or solutions that we can consider with regards to food security and how best as a region we can actually partner with each other in seeing our region being that lighthouse, as I call it, where from the Caribbean, we can actually contribute to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Roderick St. Clair.
Thank you so much, Bev, for inviting me to be on this program, and good afternoon to our panel and of course listening and viewing audience. I am Senator Roderick St. Clair, representing the farmers and fishers in the Senate of Grenada, in the Parliament. Of course, substantively, I've had many years of teaching at the high school. Also, I've worked over 2 decades in the fresh produce marketing in Grenada. And in recent years, I have been involved in the spice industry as the manager of the Nutmeg Co-op in Grenada, the Grenada Cooperative Nutmeg Association. In addition to that, I have various stints involved in media, in production of different radio programs pertaining to agriculture. I've traveled in various parts of the world and see many things for which we can all put together. And I continuously learn. Even from today, I started learning from some of our colleagues. I would have visited many of the countries and see some of the things on the ground. So I'm very happy to be part of this collective approach to agriculture in the region.
Thank you very much, Senator. And Mr. Martin.
Hello, Beverly, and hello to all the panelists. You put me in very distinguished company. I appreciate that. It's been a long time that I had the good fortune of rubbing shoulders and sharing words and thoughts with people at that level. For the last 25 years, my wife and I have owned and operated a 4-acre agro-ecotourism resort here in Dominica. We produce most of the food we use at the resort. The resort is 8 fully self-contained cottages where people can do their own cooking if they wish, but they can also do agro aerobics, which is a nice way to say they can take part in the gardening. They can go and lose some weight or gain some strength, harvesting, planting, and caring for the vegetables and fruit that we actually produce. We specialize in fruit. We have 36 different kind of tropical fruit trees on the property and grow most of our kitchen vegetables and herbal spices. That has taught me a lot. When I say taught me a lot, I did go to a school considered a good school, Cornell University, years ago. But that's where I learned that the problem with agriculture is not technology or science. The problem with agriculture is the human species. And that problem has been made more difficult and intractable by the recent new phenomena of climate change. And of course, the more recent phenomenon of the public health challenges of things like COVID. But most importantly, it's been made very difficult and near impossible to transform our agriculture into, if you will, a food supplying industry, because we've had bad governance, corrupt governance, and people who are policymakers in name only, but do not understand the harsh reality of farming, of food production, and of service industry. The net effect is notwithstanding the human efforts by several people, but not even at this point in 2021 it is, we're still struggling to grow food, to feed ourselves. A group of countries that actually has demonstrated in the past that it does have the capacity to do so. But I do believe we are still where we are because we have failed to focus on those 3 C's. The challenges, the 3 C's. Climate change, now the COVID, and corruption in government. I believe these are the 3 biggest obstacles to sustainable farming and agricultural systems in our region.
Yes, and one of the challenges that I know we do have in agriculture, and which I'd love to hear from my very esteemed panelists, the business of food importation. Food importation has become big business across the Caribbean. We can all quote figures in the billions of dollars, how much we spend on food importation every year. And Mr. Ingraham, I'd start with you in addressing this issue of spending all this money to import food. We start.
Yeah, so here in the Bahamas, we import roughly $1 billion in food annually. That is obviously a huge amount. Just very recently, one of our ministers of agriculture, recent one, up until the change of government about 2 weeks ago, had set a target to reduce that by 20%. So he's looking to, or he was looking to have $200 million in food grown, produced, and sold locally. A few things, a few challenges with that. First of all, just getting farmers together, giving them the technical assistance they need, giving them the funding they need becomes a problem. Tourism is our main business in this country. We spend on tourism huge amounts of money to bring people to these shores. We give concessions to large hotel developers and small hotel developers as well. But we don't do anywhere near that when it comes to the farming. So while some lip service gets paid to farming by the politicians, when it comes to actually putting their money where their mouth is, we don't see a lot of it. We have an organization here that a government-run and funded organization, Bahamas Agricultural Marine Science Institute, that the government, by some estimates, has spent about $50 million developing. My argument was that if they had taken $50 million and gone to 50 farmers around this country, we would have seen multiples of the amount of food that is being produced. And so it's not always wise spending of the funding. Last year during the pandemic, from my position as vice chair of the Chamber of Commerce, I urged the government to spend significant amounts of money on farming. But when the budget came out, during that, there's still a very minuscule amount of money for farming. So until we get people at the top that can get serious about it, it's going to be a challenge. We get farmers who, their crops aren't doing well because they don't have water in their farms. They don't have the funding to go out and get wells dug or to have water delivered to the farms. And so that becomes an issue. I do sometimes wonder, the government charges import duties on most of our imports, including food. And so I wonder what that plays in it. You're asking them to reduce the food bill, but then it's going to reduce their import duties. We need a tax reform in this country which will address those kinds of things. But again, we've seen a lot of not doing it. There's a lot more that I can say, whether it's, a lot of the food that comes in goes to hotels. The hotels say to us, well, the locally grown produce it's not to the standard that we need. They also complain that we have a glut of certain products at certain times of the year, and then none of it at other times of the year. And they say we need consistency in supply, we need consistency in product. So there's a number of things that have to be addressed. I think that it has to start at, I think it was Mr. Martin talking about the government's getting serious about it. And until that happens, it's going to be a challenge to do what we need to do to feed ourselves.
Yeah, and Mr. Matthias, I'd love to hear you chime in on that issue as well. You are very much involved in honey, which is a product I know that is heavily exported. There are some brands of honey that's made right here in the Caribbean, and you can't even get them on the shelves locally. They're all exported. How do you see us striking a balance between food imports and food exports? And Mr. Ingraham touched on it, the taxes, the earnings that come from the imports.
Yes, definitely. Similarly, St. Lucia is mainly a tourism-driven destination, and it supports much of our national income. Honey production is very sensitive amongst the Caribbean because obviously a lot of people believe that there's a very high demand for honey locally in all of the Caribbean islands, and beekeepers are working hard to meet the demand that is there. One of the things that persons have to be mindful of is that honey production we don't have a real agricultural sector to work hand in hand with the honey production sector, whereas in North America, it's dependent on pollination and the use of the honeybees to pollinate crops. So they work symbiotically together. Whereas in the Caribbean, most of our honey production is based on raw, natural, organic trees and forests that are abundant in the Caribbean. And one of the things that we are losing as beekeepers is our natural forage. Encroachment by mankind, land use changes from being a forested area or natural area. We're losing some of our wetlands, our mangroves, which are very good areas for honey production. And then we also have pests and diseases are also a big problem. We also always...
Stop a minute there. Did you say the mangroves are a very important area?
Yes. Not just for your natural sea defenses. You've got a variety of species of mangroves that are very good, produce very good honey, like black mangrove. It produces a very nice quality honey. You also have the white and the red mangrove that also flower and produce, nectar and pollen for the bees. But most importantly, it's a good ecosystem that as a beekeeper that your bees can depend on. So if you lose these areas, to excuse me, man-made interventions, it's going to have diverse effects on you. Also the bees can act as a rehabilitator to the mangroves to support the pollination that is required for the mangroves to survive, for them to develop and continue to grow. So it's very important that we find this balance of preserving our natural biodiversity so that things can flourish, as well as looking at dealing with consumer demands. One of the problems that we have with honey is because of the nature of the product. We find that because of climate change, we're struggling to meet the demands, especially in this period of COVID. And everybody's looking to boost their immune systems. And obviously honey is a good source to boost your immune system and give you all your dietary requirements. And we have to be mindful that people say, okay, we can't get enough local honey, let's start importing honey. But when you start importing honey from overseas, you're also importing all the little diseases that come inside of the honey. So it's very important that we try to, if we're looking at becoming a more healthy community, looking more closely at the nutrition and things that are available to us, that we safeguard our local honey industry. There's a lot of talk about being able to move honey between the islands, but even that's very complicated within itself because the laboratory analysis.
Why is it complicated?
Well, it's for a multiplicity of reasons. The first reason being is I could bring in honey from country X in North America or Europe in bulk and repackage it and say, hey, this is honey from St. Lucia. And it's not. All right, so this is the first thing that so if without a significant pollen database of all of the characteristics of the honeys from all of the Caribbean, to protect local producers from disadvantaged competition coming from other countries. People repackaging products and say, well, this is honey from St. Lucia, this is honey from Dominica, and it's really from Vietnam. All right, how can you guarantee that? You can't. So until there is a proper profile created for all of the honeys from the Caribbean, to safeguard the local producers, I have absolutely no problem if you're in Grenada and you would love to sample a bottle of my honey. It would be I would wish nothing more than to gift you a bottle so you could taste and maybe put it in your cornflakes or your granola in the morning. However, I respect my brothers and sisters who are honey producers in Grenada and Dominica, that they also need to safeguard that. How do I make sure that Richard is sending a genuine bottle of honey from St. Lucia to Grenada? And until that mechanism has been put in place, I think interregional trade of honey will be very difficult, as well as you've got the issues of the SPS issues with, how do we verify that there are no pests and diseases in any of once we're moving around the country, moving between the islands. So there's a lot of laboratory equipment that needs to be in place. There needs to be a lot of safeguards put in place before honey can move freely around the Caribbean islands without possible contaminating, creating bigger issues further down the road. So,
okay, we are going to, Mr. Matthias, we're gonna hold that thought right there. We're gonna take on time to face the facts, and we're gonna be right back with much more on what can we do to contain some of this money that we are spending to buy food. Viewers, don't go away. We're gonna be right back.
Feel good facts.
Remember, if you have flu symptoms, do the right thing and stay at home to avoid giving it to others. Remember, you can be infectious up to a week after developing symptoms, so rest up and take it easy.
sure you have your radio and your batteries too. Waterproof flashlight candles will do. Tin stuff, garbage bag, first aid kit. Come on people, make sure you have it. Clean water in a container and a hurricane plan. Hear me no man.
Hurricane damage is beyond your control. Surviving the aftermath is up to you. Have a hurricane plan. It can save your life and your family too.
Prepare for hurricane, your hair prepare for hurricane.
Men are not made to physically abuse women.
It's something that has become a serious problem in our country, or has been a serious problem in our country. Abuse could present itself in many forms. It could be physical, verbal or emotional, and the most egregious, sexual.
It's not a good look. It's not right in no form. So domestic violence against women should stop. How can you hit a woman, beat a woman?
Every form of abuse has an effect on the individual abuse, on their family members, on children, even the community as a whole.
I'm a man. I came out of a woman. I love my mother. I love my nieces. So to the children, if you're being abused, talk to somebody that you trust and get your message to the person.
This has been a message from the Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment in collaboration with its social partners. If you or anyone you know is in need of help, please feel free to contact us at 440-2269. And remember, a life free from violence is possible.
Welcome back to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. I'm your host, Beverly Sinclair, and I have with me quite an esteemed panel. We're looking at food security, water preservation, and all that we need to sustain life in the Caribbean. And they're going to be taking us through the paces as we go through this discussion here. When we went out, we were talking about honey and the challenges with just moving honey around in the region. But right now, I want to hear from Senator St. Clair before we get to Dr. Miles Morgan. I want to hear from Senator St. Clair about what are some of the issues that we actually face in containing food import. Why can't we do more locally? Senator St. Clair.
And I think if we go back to some of the points that our good friend Ingram raised, it's the same challenges that we face in Grenada and many of the other places. The larger farms, the tourism sector create the label that, you know, we cannot get reliable quality and even pricing from the local supplies, so that you would find those situations happen and our small producers, which we are mainly made up of. In fact, 30% of the world food is produced by small farmers. So we should not lose sight of that. The point is that we need to take a conscious effort. Farmers, fishers can produce once they are given proper marketing arrangements. So we need to start looking at how do we provide proper contracts? How do we believe in our people? We cannot not give them an opportunity and then at the same time turn around and say, no, they cannot. We do this for many of the foreign investors who come into our countries. We don't even know them properly. And we give them all sort of an arrangement, hoping they will deliver. That will take 5 and 6 years. Sometimes they never deliver. While someone involved in agriculture, which has a smaller gestation period, within 6 months, 4 months, 1 year, we can see the results of these products. And if you have guaranteed markets at guaranteed prices, this could happen. So the government need to be facilitated. And so sometimes they say, well, this is private sector, government don't need to be involved. But that's not a fact. For example, right now we have a major issue in Grenada. You're speaking about $400 million worth of food import bill, of which poultry is a major one, almost about $40 million. And that has been a vexing issue over the years. In fact, right now, and would have been started many years ago. There is a dialogue, there is a committee which I'm chairing right now, along with the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Trade. And inside of this, we have the supermarkets, we have the producers, and we are dialoguing, and we are coming up with a mechanism. How can we able to do business? What kind of prices can we look at? What sort of demands are we looking at? Do we have the availability at the local level? So if we do this type of things, and people have confidence in a structured way, not like, okay, well, Tom is have a special arrangement with this hotel or with this supermarket, but we need to have this in a broader way because Tom and Mary alone cannot provide the amount of food that we need anyways. And so I remember some years ago, we'd have established a similar mechanism with salad fruits, you know, and that was supported with the CTA when I was over the marketing board. And we had an arrangement, we met with hotels, met with supermarkets, with DAG, look at the demand, and so on. But you discover there's a bigger effort that you would discuss later on in your program in terms of involving all of the players in the value chain. Because a lot of times, sometimes the farmers want to produce, but the seedlings are not available. The fertilizer is not available. So they may fail, and they wonder why they fail, because they were also left alone without the necessary support. So we cannot just see agriculture as something on the side. We spend a lot of time looking at building bridges, building big buildings because we can see it. But the day we cannot get food, we feel we can import food from away, and to hell was the small farmer. So this sort of ability to have conviction that our farmers are producing real food for us to buy, then that will be able to solve the problem. We also have to look at government. Government is a major procurer of labor and of goods and services. So how does the government procurement policy lends itself to support, for example, through the institutions, so the school feeding programs? We have to look at that and see the amount of escapes that happen. So if you look at, if government tell us right now how much money is spent on imported food products for programs and other things that they spend on, you realize they themselves are committing the same error. You know, so we need to look deep. And I think my brother out of Dominica make it very clear. We have to be real and we have to face the facts, as you say, Bev. And we have to not plan and focus on agriculture in terms of where we are now. You see, a good buddy of mine said to me once, he said, you want to do certain things, but you're not set up for it. So we have to go back and look at what has happened in Grenada. For example, both agriculture and fisheries. If you look, our staff has declined. The capacity within those ministries are not there. You know, so how do you expect to achieve those goals? So we need to set ourselves 1 or 2 or 3 goals, and then you set up your system to look at it. You know, sometimes I think we, as I tell the current Minister for Agriculture, I say, brother, I think, Minister, this backyard gardening thing, you need to forget that and let maybe Ministry of Social Development handle that, and let you focus on the real big issues of how do we transform agriculture to make a difference, so that your mind is not all over the place, your workers are more focused, and we can see meaningful results. So these are the type of things I think we need to be looking at to reduce those sort of challenges that we have.
Dr. Miles Morgan, you are in a pivotal position, I would call it, based on where you are and the various connections that you have with organizations. Food import, how does that play into what you do? And do you see some place where we can really begin to minimize this? Because make no bones about it, food import is big business and it's not something that we can change overnight.
Okay, thank you. I have been listening very keenly to my colleagues on the panel, and I realize that there is a lot to give thanks for, give God thanks for. We first need to look at what exactly constitutes the types of goods that we are importing for food. As far as I'm aware, this includes processed goods. Primarily, a lot of processed goods are involved, and also inputs for the making of animal feeds, for example, and fertilizer inputs. As it relates to primary production in terms of our fruits and vegetables, grown provisions, etc., my understanding is that within the region, we tend to produce a lot of that. We would have the American or the well, I should say our extra regional partners in terms of, the apples and so that would come in. But in terms of what our people actually consume, we do understand that they consume our own locally produced food, but there is this influence in terms of an increased demand for these processed goods, which has contributed a lot to the high import bill. And of course, as I said, as relates to the inputs for animal feed, such as corn. Wheat is another example that we import a lot into the region. And I know that at least through CARICOM and certain development partners, we have been looking at how can we produce substitutes or alternates to wheat, for example. There was a big thrust that FAO, CARDI, ECO had led with the region in terms of looking at cassava, right? In terms of substituting a portion of wheat in bread making with cassava. I know that there are probably, I guess, 2 or 3 Caribbean countries who have started that. I think Barbados is one of them. And it will require a concerted effort for us to look at what it is that we do produce within the region and actually identify what I would call those big ticket items that are part of the whole import substitution, and how can we really, how can we use them as import substitution in terms of what we are experiencing now in terms of the high food bill. Also sensitizing our people in terms of what is really nutritious food, right? And we can look at our school system. It was mentioned about the food, the feeding program, the school feeding program. How can we look at incorporating more nutritious and healthy food? I know in Jamaica, this has been one of the mandates of our Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Ministry of Agriculture, seeking to look at our children coming off the high sugary diets and foods and substituting that for instead of the drinks, the sugary drinks, they can have a certain proportion of fruit, for example. But this warrants greater, I guess, public awareness, sensitization, because we are influenced by other cultures. We are influenced by that. And it will require, as I said, an effort for all of us to partner in seeing how we can best get this message across to our people that what we do have is really just as good or even better for them to consume. And I think we have a change in terms of the generation that we have to, relate to now. It's there's a big change in terms of their appetite and what they are interested in consuming. So I honestly believe that there should be a greater public effort in terms of sensitizing our youth with regards to that. But I guess that's what I can say for now. There are a number of issues that I heard in terms of honey production, for example, and beekeeping, and the challenges in St. Lucia, in Jamaica. Well, I'm in charge of, and I have our team of apiculture officers who provide that service in terms of extension and training for our beekeepers. They also go and they do surveillance for pest and disease issues, which are of economic importance to us. And they have been providing this sort of backbone and support for our beekeeping industry. And I know that we can learn from each other. And I know that our beekeeping unit, they have played an integral role in terms of, cross-fertilizing with other Caribbean countries and sharing, because I know there is a beekeeping forum that is held within the region where all the information, all the experience is shared in that forum. And I would expect that certain actions or decisions would be taken, or should I say, identified and taken, and lobbying being done by our beekeepers within the region. And I say this to say that I realize that for us as a region, there needs to be a stronger linkage in terms of cooperatives between our farmers and our producers. I recall that I can use Jamaica as an example, where we had, for example, the Livestock Association, Citrus Growers Association, and in their heyday, they really made a difference and an impact in terms of the identifying the gaps and what sort of support would have been needed to advance the industry. Unfortunately, I can say today that that these associations are no longer in existence, and would have contributed to what we're facing now, in that there is no, I guess, no representation that needs to be made on behalf of our producers. Similar to in the US or in Canada or Australia or any other country, Brazil and South America, you will find that you have these strong, producer groups. I can say that in Brazil and Colombia, I'm in research, and those organizations there have contributed significantly to, say, Embrapa in Brazil, Coprico in Colombia, in terms of, being part of the process of innovation and just knowledge development and sharing that can actually impact in the development of their particular area, whether it's livestock or crop-related area. And I don't know, I just believe that when we can really strengthen these producer organizations and get them the support that they need, right, in order for them to be even more technologically savvy. And I don't really, when I say technologically savvy, I don't mean necessarily to take on what is being done in North America or anywhere else, and then we just do it here in the Caribbean, but being aware of the science and the technological innovations that can be made adaptable to our context, within which we can now realize the type of growth that we need. I think it was Martin who spoke about the whole agroecological system. Actually, it is a, what do you call it? It's a holistic, or it's a cycle where everything is really captured within the cycle. You don't have to depend on going outside. The waste, everything is reutilized. I just think that there's so much potential in our region, and we just need to just partner together and share what the experiences have been for so long. I hear the cry about, government and in some jurisdictions not being facilitators. In Jamaica, one of the policy directives is about government being a facilitating or providing a facilitating and an enabling environment for our citizens to maximize their potential, right? At least for the Ministry of Agriculture. And there are systems that we have put in place, extension systems, where I know our small farmers have benefited from the engagement with our extension officers. The issue is, and I believe it was Senator Roderick who mentioned it, about the limited staffing capacity, because we have a good extension service, but the ratio of an extension officer to a farmer, it is just too great for them to be effective enough to reach everybody, which therefore means we have to depend on technologies, digital technologies that can aid in capturing the information that is needed and that we can better utilize and analyze and inform what sort of support, right, our farmer groups are going to need going forward. Because within the Caribbean, the the biodiversity. I think within Latin America and the Caribbean, we currently have, I don't know, I think about 40 or so percent of retained biodiversity in the world, right? And it is just for us to really partner together and to have even, not just to talk about it, but to really map what we do have in our different jurisdictions or different small island states. What is the best thing that St. Lucia, what is that thing that is best for St. Lucia, typical of St. Lucia, and to promote that for St. Lucia, for Jamaica, Dominica. What are the cross-cutting areas? We mentioned beekeeping or honey and the other products from beekeeping before. How can we, come together and really just make some plans and decisions and identify where we can get the funding support to action some of these things? I don't know if I'm just, this is just a passion that's just coming out, right?
You have a lot on the table, Dr. Myers.
Right, so I'm just trying to, I'm just absorbing everything that has been said, and I guess in the short time trying to see how best I can make some recommendations, basically, right? And so thank you for now.
Yes, for now. And I'm waiting patiently to hear from Mr. Martin, because I have to say I learned something already today about the mangroves and the beekeeping. I never saw an association there at all, but I know that climate change and protection of the environment is something that Mr. Martin is very, very passionate about. And I'm really, really anxious to hear his views on how all of that feeds into what we do in the region and why we have to import so much of what we eat, although Dr. Miles Morgan has kind of segmented that into showing the various different kinds of imports. But how does this protection or non-protection of our environment, how does that feed into the fact that we have to import so much of what we eat? Mr. Martin?
I'm going to say that there is something that I'm much more passionate about than the environment, and it's people. In the final analysis, any work done to protect the biodiversity of the globe and to protect the global, garden is about protecting people. And I think often industries like agriculture, sectors like agriculture, like tourism, like manufacturing, even like education, forget that these things are really all about people. So if we did a sensitivity analysis on each one of these sectors, but used as a major criterion for that analysis, how did the people benefit? We would be shocked. We are putting people through schools, children through schools, and they're coming out unable to read, but with a certificate saying that they went to high school. Who does that benefit? And so it seems to me that we really have to go back to first principles, which is what Dr. Morgan is talking about. We have to go back to first principles. If it is about people, people cannot survive without land, without water, and without air. Let's ask ourselves, how has what we have done in the Caribbean relating to agriculture and tourism, the two biggest industries used to be, how has what we have done with those two sectors enabled us to have access to land, to learn how to use land, to have access to water, and to be healthy enough to become wealthy? And I have no doubt that there would be some failing grades throughout our region. And I say that because in the final analysis, a farmer without land to farm is not a farmer. He's a rural poor person. A mother without food to feed her children is really just that, of a mother of poor, unhealthy children. I want to put to you that there are many things that we can do right away to change that really apocalyptic kind of picture. Many things, and not new things, In 1976, I worked for 6 months in Frome and Monimusk on the sugar estates in those two parts of Jamaica. And you know what I did? In 6 months, we converted 1,000 acres of land on those two estates away from sugarcane to food crops. Michael Manley had challenged me to do it. He heard me speaking at a conference and he said, young man, I'm going to challenge you. I agree with what you're saying, but come and show me if you can do it. And we did it. And we did it based on the data that the sugar estates themselves had collected, showing they had isolated all the acreages that were grossly inefficient in the production of sugar, but nonetheless, they continued to grow sugar. So we took those acreages and we converted them into yams, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, dasheen, cucumbers, and within 6 months, we had some of these crops ready for the market. And so we made a case. I'll never forget going to the cabinet and saying to Mr. Manley and his cabinet, we have a model here, we have a template here. And it's a template built on the knowledge of the sugar workers, who were simply workers at the time. But we converted some of these workers into farmers, decision makers, what to plant, where to plant it, why to plant it, how to bring the animals into the farm system, back into the farm system, and get away from monocrop sugarcane. They did it. Mr. Manley agreed to do it, but here is what happened. The Sugar Industry Authority, which ran the sugar mills, refused to allow the lands of the sugar estates to be converted away from sugar. And so that never happened. Although we had living models on Frome and Monimusk, we helped him create sugar worker cooperatives on those estates. So, which is what a lot of members of the panel do. You organize farmers, you organize producers so that the connected power of those people create a critical force. That is still the way to go. That is like breathing. There's no new way to breathe. There's only one way to breathe. And it's been around for a long time. There's only one way to make change, is to organize people, to empower people, to help them see that they too have knowledge. All these sugar workers were frustrated farmers. They knew how to grow root crops. They knew how to grow vegetables and raise animals, but they weren't allowed to. They didn't have land because all the land was for sugar. That's number one. How do we reconnect this movement of farmers throughout our region to sort of create such an assault on a system that keeps us poor and unhealthy, that no sugar industry authority, no banana industry authority, no major core authority would be able to withstand it, to have rule over that. We can do that because I also worked with the Windward Islands Farmers Union, WINFA, Windward Islands Farmers Association in Grenada, in St. Vincent, in St. Lucia, in Jamaica. We started that process of organizing small farmers throughout the Caribbean. That's the power. That's the power for change. Not the politician, not the bankers, not the shippers, not the merchants. The power is the farmer. And if we organize them and put 1/10 of the effort and resources into them, as we put into tourism and roads and all the big things we like to call development, within a short period of time, in 3 years, it is my view, in 3 years, the Caribbean can become a food self-sufficient region again, in 3 years. But it means we have to push as hard as we are pushing against COVID now. We have to push harder than that for food, for farmers, for nutrition. And the final thing is this. In 2001, I resigned from a government in Dominica. I was a minister for agriculture and planning and the environment. And I resigned because I saw where it was going. I saw it was going to end up destroying the fundamentals, the base for agriculture, the base for production, the base for a truly independent island. I resigned. And one of the things I did since then is that I worked with a group of farmers and we purchased a refrigerated ship from a fisherman's cooperative in Norway. They gave it to us for a peppercorn rate. We brought that ship down and we used to grow and purchase and deliver produce from Dominica to islands north of us and some islands south of us every week. One little group of farmers were able to do that. Multiply that, my brothers and sisters, multiply that by 10, a factor of 10. And you begin to understand the power. You don't even have to go and talk to a supermarket owner. They will come and talk to you. They will come and negotiate with you because you are presenting a viable alternative to this madness of food importation, which is not food, that they import. It's poisons they import, calling it food. So I'm saying that we have examples in our toolkit. And some of these people are still alive. I'm 75, but I started this work in my 20s. And there are a lot of other people like this throughout the Caribbean. But do we talk to them? Do the ministers talk to them? Do the chief technical officers talk to them or listen to them? What about the women farmers who are the drivers of food production throughout the region? Does anybody talk to women about agriculture and farming and business and packing plants? No, we don't. So there is no way without doing some of those things. And there are many more. I had some interesting experience in raising money for doing that without going to beg a government for money. There is money out there for independent farmer organizations, independent rural. And finally, I would say, you see this thing of planning, as long as we continue to plan as if we each lived in little cubicles, little bubbles, as they call it now with COVID. Agriculture not talking to education. Education ain't talking to tourism. Tourism ain't talking to common works. And so nobody talking to nobody because everybody want to do their own thing. But it's the same island we're working in. It's the same people. It's the same roads. It's the same air, the same water. My company prepared an integrated development plan for Dominica, a 20-year plan. It was paid for by the European Union. And the plan laid out how to do this template for Dominica. You know what happened? Although it was commissioned by the government, the same government I resigned from, the government mangled it, set it aside, didn't put it. Permanent secretaries were against it because their power was challenged. Chief technical officers were against it because their power was challenged, and not to mention the ministers. Because it said you cannot make a decision on where to build a road, you, Mr. Common Works Minister, without talking to agriculture, tourism, disaster management, etc., etc. All those people have to be at the table with you. Integrated development planning. You know what has happened to that plan? One of the provinces in South Africa got a hold of that plan as I presented it at a conference in South Africa. And that is the plan they are using to transform their provincial economy. And the country that commissioned the plan has never implemented not one iota of it. That integrated approach, that partner approach, that sharing approach, that draws the knowledge power out of our people and places it at their service. I'm telling you people, I'm sorry, I get really exercised by this. Politicians are not my friends. I used to be, I flirted with politics, but I am not a politician. I am somebody that politicians, when they see me, they mess their pants because we take no prisoners. How can we be taking prisoners and letting them go to court this week, next week, the other thing, when people are dying and starving? It's not COVID that's killing our people. We are unhealthy. We are unhealthy. We're eating bad food. We're drinking dirty water. We're breathing contaminated air. We have no place to exercise, and we expect a virus to come and not knock us down.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold it right there. We're going to take another break on the program, and we're going to be right back with much, much more food production, water security, and taking care of ourselves, feeding ourselves in the Caribbean. Viewers, don't go anywhere.
With so much information about COVID-19 on the news, children can become overwhelmed and even fearful, especially if they have a medical condition. As a parent, you can help to manage your child's fears and anxiety. Provide your child with the correct information about the virus. Remind them to wash their hands frequently with soap and water and to cover their cough and sneezes with a tissue or into their elbow. Monitor what your child sees about COVID-19, especially on social media, where the information may be misleading. Be aware of your own response. Instead of panicking or appearing anxious, reacting calmly could help to allay your child's fears and anxiety, and they too will model your behavior. Remember, how your child responds is dependent on you.
No one should live in fear of the person they love, children included.
This is something that is really becoming an issue within our country, and we need to make necessary steps to stop it.
It seems like sexual violence against women and children has become habitual.
Abusers, Mr. Sickle, it ain't macho to get on. So I said no, I said no, I said no, nowhere.
This has been a message from the Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment in collaboration with its social partners. If you or anyone you know is in need of help, please feel free to contact us at 440-2269. And remember, a life free from violence is possible.
I remember when this beach was really wide, a place to picnic and play cricket.
And we used to go up to the end to get away from all the people. Now all the beach gone.
Coastal erosion. When the sea starts to come in and take the land away, everyone loses something.
Granny, look how the waves are washing right under that house.
Coastal erosion. It's a hazard. Hazards. Take control. Reduce your loss. What can you do to help stop coastal erosion? For one, don't drive four-wheel vehicles on seaside dunes. They loosen sand and destroy binding vegetation, causing erosion. Find out more about coastal erosion and other hazards at your local disaster office. A message from the National Disaster Management Agency and SEDERA.
Welcome back, viewers, to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. I'm your host, Beverly Sinclair, and I have with me Mr. Atherton Martin from Dominica. He is a farmer. He has an eco resort in Dominica. We have Dr. Myers Morgan. She's a researcher from Jamaica. We have Richard Matthias. He takes care of the bees. He has an apiary, manages the association across the Caribbean. We have Senator Roderick St. Clair, who takes care of the fishers and the farmers in Grenada. And we have Mr. Timothy Ingraham. Panelists, I am so excited to be in your company as we walk through agriculture and taking care of our food, taking care of ourselves. One of the issues that has come up in our discussion so far, nutrition and the food we eat. But again, I want to hear from Mr. Ingraham, who has been in finance, the cost of nutrition to families. Mr. Martin went through, describing how little it is, how little it benefits a family if you're not able to provide nutrition for that family. Mr. Ingraham, the cost of nutrition to a family, how does that impact on us now, especially in these covidious times when we are seeking to feed ourselves better and to take better care of our immune systems?
Unfortunately, the cost of the fresh, quote unquote, foods that we sell locally far outweighs the processed foods. So if you are, let's say you're a single mother with 3 children that you want to feed, you go into the food store, you see a head of broccoli That's $4, $5 maybe for that head of broccoli, and that's just the broccoli. You could go to the Chinese restaurant on the corner from you, and you can get for that same $5, you can get a meal of fried rice with chicken wings, which will feed your family sufficiently so that they won't go hungry that evening. So that is obviously a huge disincentive for persons who want to eat healthy. I mean, forget the locally grown stuff. Even imported stuff is so expensive that local persons, or the average local person earning a basic wage, finds it very difficult to afford healthy food. We have tried in this country to encourage persons to take up backyard farming. I would give the government credit for providing the equipment and everything to persons who wanted to go into your backyard and to grow whatever you can eat. And became even more popular during the beginning stage of COVID. Unfortunately, not enough technical assistance was provided, I think. So for a lot of persons, we know how to plant it, but do we know how to keep the bugs away? Do we know when to put the fertilizer? And those are the kinds of things that I think have fell down. We also have problems in our education system. Certainly in the Bahamas here, we have that. One of the things which has been demonstrated is that if children at an early age, and I think it's up to 7 or 8 years old, do not get nutritional meals with all of the vitamins and minerals they need, their brain function doesn't develop as optimally as it should. And so when we think of the single mother with the young kids who can't afford to buy fresh produce, she has to go and buy the processed stuff, something in a can, the Chinese food. I pick on them, but I could just as easily say the fried chicken or whatever else, with French fries. And so those kids are not getting the nutrition they need to develop their brains. And the problem then becomes bigger than just unhealthy eating. The problem becomes an educational problem. And I think it was Mr. Martin who said we need to sit everyone around the table and understand that it's all connected. We need to understand that if these kids aren't getting what they need, they're going to become problems in school. So now you're dealing with the police and national security issues. And so these are some of the things that I think we need to look at. How do we get nutritious food into the hands of people that really need the nutritious food? How do we prevent some of the learning disorders? In the Bahamas, our lifestyle, the lifestyle diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, all of these are far too common among our population. It means that, as has been pointed out, I think it was Mr. Martin again who said, COVID is a problem for us because of our lifestyles, because of the foods we eat. And that is certainly true in the Bahamas, that we have, I think our death toll is approaching 500 now. And a lot of it is because we have persons with unhealthy diets. And so when they get ill, their body is not able to fight these things off. They're already have a number of comorbidities that's causing a problem. And I think we here in the Bahamas probably have an even bigger issue than some of you guys have, because we have a huge proliferation of American fast food restaurants. And we know that there's virtually no nutritional content in a lot of the things that we go and purchase from them. So it's something that we need to deal with on many levels. There's a huge impact to it, but we need to find out how do we bring the cost down for persons to be able to afford nutritious food, so that we're not constantly eating processed stuff that's really not good for us, that's not helping our kids, that's not helping us in the long run in any way, shape, or form.
Mr. Matthias, how has COVID-19 impacted on your industry? And what can your industry do really to help with the cost of the local foods that we eat? Is there anything that you can do? I mentioned earlier that the honey industry is probably does best with exports than others. Is there any way that you can fit into helping down the cost of foods locally so we can feed ourselves better?
Yes, COVID-19 has been both a blessing and a curse. And my heart goes out to all the families across the Caribbean that have had lost loved ones due to the pandemic. I myself have lost members of my family to the pandemic. But as I said, it's been both a blessing and a curse. It's made. I mean, I remember the first weeks of COVID when the shops, supermarkets were closed and everything was closed and so forth, and people started to look inwards and to see what they could do for themselves. I myself, I planted over close to 100 planting trees because, so I said, well, at least a few months from now, I'll be able to start heaping the benefits, which I did. And, and I was able to share amongst my family members and friends some of these resources, because it wasn't really about the profit of making money, it was making sure everybody could eat something healthy. So it was all good. From a beekeeping standpoint, I mean, all the beekeepers I know in St. Lucia greatly benefit. It's been a nice, the weather has been good this year. We were a little touch and go when the volcano erupted in St. Vincent and really affected our brothers in St. Vincent. And, a lot of their hives were devastated in that part of the world, but the weather has been favorable this year. If you look further south to Trinidad and Guyana, climate change has affected them badly. Trinidad had not of the best of honey seasons in Trinidad this year because of climate change. Guyana, I think I just left Guyana a couple of weeks ago, and some of my colleagues there were harvesting their first honey for the year because they had so much. They missed the January. The December-January flow was not there for them at all of 2020. So they're now harvesting their first honey for the year now. So it's been a good period for some of us. We've been able to benefit from, high demand for honey. As the honey was ripe and ready to harvest, it was able to be packaged and sold straight away. I know my good friend, Dr. Jessamy in Grenada, she's made some fantastic strides with her photo-med honey, which has, it's really been specially, she's got a large estate in Grenada, and she's cultivated a lot of trees that have high medicinal properties, so that the honey that she produces is of a high antioxidant, has very good antibacterial properties, which is good for the health. And she's done some great work and in that regard. So it's really brought the region back to basics, and they've been looking at traditional remedies and looking at using honey as one of those things that can help boost your immune system, taking some pollen to help boost your immune system. All these things are good for you. Propolis is one of the original, is an extract from the beehive, and it was one of the active ingredients in early cough medicines, and it's a good healer for wounds and stuff like that. So people has really had somewhat of a renaissance. An interest in apiculture. There's a lot of new persons that want to enter the industry. As the president of the Association of Caribbean Beekeepers, I meet a lot of persons who are interested in entering the industry. I get a lot of emails from persons. Dr. Morgan, I conversed with with the head of extension in Jamaica, Mr. Hugh Smith, quite a lot. So I may have presented, or at least I attended one of their they've done a lot of sessions with their beekeepers in Jamaica. Jamaica has one of the largest colonies of managed colonies in the Caribbean. I think you have over 150,000 colonies of bees in Jamaica. So they're one of the top producers in the English-speaking Caribbean for honey. They have a great market in Europe and North America. Jamaica and Cuba are the only two Caribbean countries that actually have a residual monitoring plan in place that allows them to export honey into the European Union. So the rest of us, the other Caribbean islands, missed the boat on that one, but Cuba and Jamaica stayed on point and were able to take advantage of that opportunity. So they do export a lot of honey into Europe, especially, there's a large Jamaican community living in England, living across the European continent, and it's good for them to be able to get their local Jamaican honey, as well as supplying the Jamaican, the domestic market with Jamaican honey. So it's very important, that we look at the opportunity that the honey has, and especially the biodiversity of natural plants and forages we have in the Caribbean, that can really, maybe we don't need to, some of the things that we need to look at in honey is that maybe we don't need to supply the massive volumes as countries such as Venezuela and Brazil produced for export to North America and into other larger countries, but because of, if we zoom in on the medicinal properties of our trees and forage in the Caribbean, and try to sell a small amounts just for much more money, it will be beneficial for all of us in the Caribbean. So I think, Dr. Jessamine in your homeland of Grenada has led the charge in that regard. She's put one of the things that have been missing, and one of the things why I studied with Cornell University and became a master beekeeper, is because in the Caribbean, apiculture is focused mainly on the craft, and it doesn't encompass the science. And one of the things I think, in not just in my sector of apiculture, but generally across the board in agriculture, our day-to-day farmers are not embracing the science. And I think it's critical, if we're good to help revive the industry, and also bring younger people, young persons who are used to using the cell phone and stuff like that. And, we need to incorporate the technology and the science to draw younger persons into it. One of the things that we have done, we're working through the Global Environmental Facility, GFSGP UNDP, is that we've developed a Hive, what we call a Hive app, that works on yourself and your Android phone, and it enables you to do your general hive management, keep proper records for your beehives, and any treatments you've done, any observations you've made, any changes you make to observations you need to do to the hive. We've incorporated that into an app that works on your Android phone, and it speaks specifically to the Caribbean. We did it in partnership with an Indian software company called Leopardtech, but it was developed by some of the best beekeeping minds in the Caribbean to help bring this app into fruition. One of the things we've also done is that through this program with GFSGP UNDP, we've created an online platform for people to learn apiculture. And we've been working with different agencies, University of the West Indies, the Bureau of Standards in some of the territories, long-standing beekeepers, Mr. Mohammed Halim, who was the extension officer for apiculture in Trinidad for 20 years, Gladstone Solomon in Trinidad. We've had persons, it's a whole team. It's a vast team. Anybody I haven't mentioned, I apologize for not remembering, but we had a vast team. Occupational health and safety experts, Dalia Corribe. So we've had a lot of different people trying to encapsulate a program that would give an introduction to apiculture and embrace the science, embrace the technology, embrace the platform, and also to be able to reference to put them in contact with country mentors in each of their countries so that they can work alongside a mentor to bring them through. I remember when I first started apiculture, it was like a lot of hit and miss by myself for a long time until I really got a grasp, and I worked alongside some really good beekeepers. So I think from a COVID perspective overall, It's been a lesson of introspective. A lot of us have to look inwards. I know, once again, in Grenada, you guys have done great. You've been able to sustain your nutmeg industry despite COVID, and you've still been able to bring in revenue for the small farmers, which I think was a fantastic thing. So I think, by and large, in general, the agriculture sector really needs to zoom in on what they can do, what they're good at, and to do it better. And I really like the initiative from Mr. Martin, buying a refrigerated ship in Europe to move fresh produce around the islands. That's a masterstroke move. And it takes more masterstroke moves like that generated by the persons in the industry to make it better. Maybe if Mr. Martin and his team, I said, okay, well, let's not just look as the ship goes up to if we're going to Antigua and we're coming up from Grenada, or we're going down to maybe Barbados from Dominica. Let's stop at St. Lucia and see if them guys got anything there to go along on the way. So and that way you get the coalition of farmers from across the Caribbean working together. And I think that's what we really need to do, is start to create these coalitions of persons in the sector working together and driving the market. Governments need to play their part, give us the concessions. If we need to bring 2 ships in, well, let us bring those 2 ships in duty free. Let us get parts and machinery and experts to help us maintain these ships. But let's drive the industry, because if I know guys that grow stuff and there's a glut of maybe cucumbers in St. Lucia where they need cucumbers desperately somewhere else. Now you can't put cucumbers on a plane and get them to point Z and expect it to sell at a reasonable price. But if you've got the cargo service to move produce between the islands, and we used to do this before. This is not a new thing. We used to do this before, and we've just abandoned this. We've started to rely on, America. If we want something cheap, man, we can fly in bell peppers from America, at an exorbitant price, and we can sell them at that same exorbitant price plus because it's XYZ from America. And I think we need to. In some respects, re-socialize ourselves and re-socialize our people, and I think COVID-19 is a catalyst to that.
I agree with you right there, right,
yes.
Mr. Matthias. But we're gonna take another break and come back. I tell you, we run out of time very quickly on this program.
Sure.
When we get back, we're just gonna have time to hear from the panel. How do we move forward from here? And I mean, seriously, Mr. Martin has talked about things that we can do right now. How do we move forward from here in securing ourselves, ensuring that we can feed ourselves? Because the food supply chain is interrupted, it has been interrupted, and we have to prepare for what's coming down the tube. Viewers, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back to wrap up this edition of Time to Face the Facts.
Water up to my belly, mattress floating, furniture floating, even the TV set floated for a while,
My sneakers were floating just like boats.
Floods. They can happen so suddenly. What can you do?
Listen, when I saw the portable toilet from the construction site up the road float by, and I realized that all that stuff was in the water.
Floods. Hazards. Take control. Reduce your loss. What can you do to help stop flooding? Keep drains and wells clean and unblocked. Find out lots more about floods and other hazards at your local disaster office. A message from the National Disaster Management Agency and SEDERA.
Men are not made to physically abuse women.
It's something that has become a serious problem in our country, or has been a serious problem in our country. Abuse could present itself in many forms. It could be physical, verbal or emotional, and the most egregious, sexual.
It's not a good look. It's not right in no form. So domestic violence against women should stop. How can you hit a woman, beat a woman,
Every form of abuse has an effect on the individual abuse, on the family members, on children, even the community as a whole.
I'm a man. I came out of a woman. I love my mother. I love my nieces. So to the children, if you're being abused, talk to somebody that you trust and get your message to the person.
This has been a message from the Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment in collaboration with its social partners. If you or anyone you know is in need of help, please feel free to contact us at 440-2269. And remember, a life free from violence is possible.
With so much information about COVID-19 on the news, children can become overwhelmed and even fearful, especially if they have a medical condition. As a parent, you can help to manage your child's fears and anxiety. Provide your child with the correct information about the virus. Remind them to wash their hands frequently with soap and water and to cover their cough and sneezes with a tissue or into their elbow. Monitor what your child sees about COVID-19, especially on social media, where the information may be misleading. Be aware of your own response. Instead of panicking or appearing anxious, reacting calmly could help to allay your child's fears and anxiety, and they too will model your behavior. Remember, how your child responds is dependent on you.
Welcome back to all our viewers to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. We're looking at food security, water security, how we are going to feed ourselves in this Caribbean. I have with me quite an illustrious panel, and we have not even touched water in any significant way, and we are already running out of time. Senator St. Clair, feeding ourselves, putting in place systems that can ensure that we have food and water to go forward beyond COVID. Nobody knows when COVID is going to end, but we have to survive in it, through it, and prepare for the life that's going to come after it. How do we do that, Senator?
Well, it's a good question. How do we do? And I really like that part, because the lack of doing is part of our problem. We have several plans, and those plans exist. They exist all over, but suffice to plans, we have to look at the now, and we have to look at what I would say the short term. So the now is we need to ensure, and Brother Ingram spoke of that, and maybe it's a Caribbean thing with this backyard gardening approach. I don't like to call it backyard gardening. I like to call it kitchen garden. That's why I was growing. I grew it for the kitchen. It means that it's for within yourself and your neighbors. It's not nothing for it's not no commercial approach, and so you'd have those needs, and that's fine. But then we have to scale it up, because there are others who are outside of that reach. But what we recognize also is that over the 30% of persons who live in the rural areas who depend on agriculture for their living, meaning that as their source of income, we find it's more difficult for them to be able to purchase and procure the same healthy foods that we need them, because the escalation of those same prices. So I raised that to show a sort of disparity. And if you look at the IFAD report recently, 2021, they spoke about those sort of injustices within the whole agriculture system for our small scale farmers. So in terms of the now, we need to look and see what are the key products, whether it's fish, whether it's meat, that we need to produce, whether it's vegetables, for us to be able to consume. And these have to be concerted efforts that we have to make as a strategic position, that if we don't do it, we will die, meaning that there will be no food. Let's suppose the plane cannot come. If you realize what is happening now, our freight cost is astronomical. So how much more leakage of our foreign exchange are we prepared to work on. So we need to look at that aspect. We also need to look at the same time to find those agriculture enterprises that can keep generating foreign exchange. So how do we leverage them? How do we give them some more stimulus? We also need to look and see the small and medium-sized service providers within the agriculture service sector, for example, transportation, packaging, input suppliers, because these small SMEs employ almost 30% again of our population, both youth and women. So it also would help ease out of the burden that the governments and them are trying to solve if we just incentivize properly and we connect them to chains that are going to make a difference. So that is in the now. In the short term, and the short term is within the next 6 months, that short term, we need to now take a strategic approach and see how do we hold on the gains that we would make from the now, and how do we have that to bring us for, I would say, another 2 years or so. Because as we say, this pandemic is going to last for a while. So we need to look at that. So we need to improve the technology, as we mentioned. How do we improve information technology, information about the market, information on when to plant what? How do we ensure also that we have a lot of the germplasm that we need to protect, because we must not lose sight that we are also living in a hurricane area and a volcanic area, which could also hit us on the back end. So I would say these are the sort of things we need to look at. So even as governments look at the budgeting and so on, we need to look at that and not depend also on monies from projects. Too much time we depend on monies from projects, some funding agency, and these interventions a lot of time are more for prototype to show that this could be replicated, but it's not going to have the sort of transformational effect for our food security. So this is something that our governments have to look at. How do we really create that sort of funds that will be available in that way? I think, and also not leaving out the people. I think, Brother Martin, I mean, you speak a book, you speak many Bibles. We cannot leave out the people from the ground right up, because they are the ones that are going to drive it. And it's not only the politicians, our technocrats, our public servants need to know that this is the approach to make differences. And so you tend to find happening a sort of conflict when organizations, civil society, etc., say, let us do this thing bottom up. And then you have that connection. So sometimes it's not the politicians per se that have that challenge. And so at my role as a senator representing farmers and fishers in Grenada, I sort of understand and move between all of those lines as an independent senator, ensuring that some of those blockades, if you want to call them, can be removed or eased up so that things could be better for everybody. So that is what I would say as my point. And in terms of water, I know Grenada has a water policy that is almost 90% completed. That is something that is key. And we have to not forget the use of just the sea as a resource. I mean, only recently, the OECS has put out a study from a report. 15% of the conch production in the Caribbean is basically Grenada, St. Vincent, and Lucia. What are we doing about that? You know, so here I hope we don't drop the ball again in terms of ways to bring monies for our region.
Thank you, Senator. And Dr. Myers Morgan, what can we do now to ensure our food security or water security in these COVIDious times and beyond?
Well, firstly, I would like us to explore looking at what has worked within the region, right? What lessons can we learn from those experiences? Can these experiences be applied currently? Secondly, we need to look at, for our SMEs, in terms of research and development. I know based on the funding issue, and most of us tend to be somewhat risk averse in the Caribbean, and we have not been exploring that option in terms of how can we use, as I would call, spillover technologies to improve on our own production systems. And when I speak of SMEs, I'm not speaking just of manufacturers, but our farmers are in that category as well. There is need for the support technically in terms of bodies, right? Trained bodies. And when I say trained, I don't just mean trained in terms of a knowledge of, I guess technology, but in terms of that social aspect, having a sociologist involved in the whole thing, whereby there is this, it's brought to bear that the value of our farmers' contribution is a rich one, right? We don't have to be put in a box where we only think that knowledge can come from certain areas, right? So we need to incorporate and engage our clients, our stakeholders in terms of playing a role in developing what is important for them, what is going to help them to be more efficient, what is going to help them to have a more sustainable production system, for example. We need to ensure that all the actors are brought together in doing this. I recall an example, I think it's in China, where there is this policy with a research institute whereby their researchers must spend time, meaning during a crop cycle, with the farmer, on the farmers holding. I know we call this, I think the FAO, where we have this thing where we follow the farmers throughout the production cycle and we evaluate and then we assist them, right? Give them the opportunity to choose, right? Sometimes we believe that because we may have knowledge or studied wherever, that it sort of supersedes what they know, but they're the ones who are doing it daily. And so we need to really ensure that we engage them in that process. In terms of networking, it's very critical going forward. We need to identify those or develop those mechanisms by which we can foster stronger linkages within the Caribbean. There was mention about how we can share or sell or transmit or transfer food from one island to the next. There's this thing called blockchain technology that we can further investigate, because with that technology, a farmer can know who needs that particular product, or a buyer can know where in the Caribbean they can get that particular product. So we need to see how we can explore that. Blockchain can also be used in terms of monitoring, in terms of food safety, also in terms of even pest and disease monitoring application. We know less about that, but it can be used in terms of monitoring for food safety. I just wanted to say something in terms of, there are two things happening where we have a focus on trade, and we have domestic versus export, right? We need to understand that, yes, we need to be able to feed ourselves. We need to focus on domestic food production. And at the same time, because we operate in this world, we're not in a vacuum by ourselves, that trade is very important, because there's some things that we must trade in, whether it's for health, in terms of the inputs that we need for health and other areas. And I think a balance needs to be struck. I don't know if I'm getting this point across clearly, but we need to understand that the two will have to coexist, but we need to ensure that, as it relates to our domestic food production and food security, that we are adopting sustainable options for it, especially based on the fact that we are, as Senator Roderick Sinclair had said, that we're in a hurricane belt, plus the issues of climate change that are impacting on the region. So it is very important that we practice our production in a way that is sustainable. Mr. Martin and others that I'm aware of, in Jamaica we have Durga's Den, who also have this holistic way, and we have organic farmers who have been seeking to influence the production system so that we can actually protect our environment, protect our communities when it comes to these natural disasters that have affected us in the region over time. Right, so that's basically.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Myers Morgan, because we are down to our last few minutes. So I just want to give about a minute each. Gentlemen, we have to keep it short. To Mr. Martin, I know he's on a time constraint, you know, so he may have to leave us even before we are through. So Mr. Martin, your thoughts that you will put on the table that we can take away.
The one thought I would like to leave with us is this. Let's learn to count our blessings. I listened to the brother talk about the network of people that he has, that he works with throughout the region and beyond. All of us have networks. One of the things Europeans do very well is they network among themselves. One of the things Black people don't do very well is network among ourselves. Let us share what we know with each other. You talked about moving food. You talked about moving water. A few months ago, Beverly right there introduced me to an entrepreneur in Grenada in the water bottling business. I am happy I can say on this program, by the end of this year, we will have a counterpart water bottling enterprise right here in Dominica that will work with that firm in Grenada to address jointly the need for water, high quality water in the islands. In addition to, so just by networking, we can convert ideas into realities. We have a financier, we have ordered the plant, we have a site for the plant, we have found the source of water coming out of a World Heritage Site in Dominica. The best water in the world is going to be soon available throughout the Eastern Caribbean. All as a result of Beverly Sinclair networking us with a colleague of hers in Grenada. Interestingly, we have a young Dominican, 42 years old. He has a roll-on, roll-off ship capable of carrying 6 20-foot containers. He moves produce every week from Dominica to Martinique and St. Lucia. And in St. Lucia, he picks up cargo to come back up north, and he goes as far north as St. Kitts. Those 6 containers can be filled with agricultural produce from throughout each island and delivered, and can bring back other manufactured goods and items. It exists. It is here. We have that capacity. So if you have people in St. Lucia who have things that they're producing that they can't sell, let us know. There will be empty containers there on a roll-on, roll-off ship that can be filled and can be delivered to your buyers. We have that capacity now. What we need to do is put in, count our blessings otherwise. We are Caribbean. We are a one beautiful people. And why don't we do something really dramatic as we did with cricket many, 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 many years ago? Something globally dramatic. Why don't we start and put together a post-COVID regional budget for transformation of the Caribbean? Why don't we get our people, if not the governments, why don't we do it at the level of the people and let the people come up with a plan and a budget for transforming ourselves away from this period of dependency? I really feel we have that capacity. I know we do. I listened to you, one of you went to Cornell. That's where I went to school. Many years ago. So we have networks here. I still work with my university on matters of research and development and so forth. So brothers and sisters, let us count our blessings. And we will be happily surprised to see that our glass is not only half full, it is nearly full. But we're looking at somebody else's glass, not at our glass. On that note, I really have to go, my friends. Beverly, you can put us in touch with each other, please. You have their numbers, you have our numbers. Put us in touch with each other, and we will make something happen, as we are doing with the water bottling thing. I have another meeting waiting on me, so I have to excuse myself, sadly.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us, Mr. Atlee Martin. Mr. Matthias, I can only give you about a minute to put your thoughts on the table, what we're gonna do now to go forward.
I think everything that needs to be said has probably already been said, so there's not much more I can add to that. I could just reach out to my fellow beekeepers across the region and tell them to hold strong, stay persistent. No one but us really knows the cost of how much what the work that's involved in producing a single bottle of honey along with the bees. It's apiculture is not. It's very glamorized and picturesque industry. I work in nature. It's fun. I enjoy it, but it's a lot of hard work as well. And I think everybody, respect the price of the honey that your beekeeper asks for the honey. If it's X dollars for the bottle, it's X dollars for the bottle, and it's going to be top quality honey that they'll give you. And that's all I can say, man. But
Thank you so much. Mr. Ingraham?
I laugh because Mr. Matthias would be happy to know that when I finish this, my local honey supplier has a gallon of honey for me for $95.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so he said that's what it is, and that's what it is. So I definitely look to support him. No, I just think most of what needs to be said was said here today. I think the ideas are here. I think we just need to motivate our people from the ground up to get this done and to link things. I always say farmers know how to farm. Farmers don't know how to sell their products and market their products. And so we need to bring everyone in together and start to do these things. Technology is a huge way to do that. I imagine an app where every farmer in this country can put in whatever it is he has to sell. And I, as a consumer, can go into that app and see what it is I'm looking to purchase. And if he has it, I can send him a message, say, hey, I need to get this from you. And so I think the solutions are there. The technology is great. I think we have to embrace it all. And one of the things that really concerned me at the beginning of the pandemic was obviously the US looking out for themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have to do that for your people. Food was in short supply. The food chains with all of the factories closing down, they couldn't process food. And so there became a real fear that we would not be able to import food from the US, that they would stop imports because they really needed their food themselves. And one of my recommendations in my position as vice chairman of the Chamber of Commerce to the government was to develop better linkages with our Caribbean brothers and sisters so that we all become codependent on each other, so that in times like these, we take care of each other. We don't have to worry that if the boat doesn't come from Miami, we're going to starve. And we just work together a lot better to solve these problems and even bigger problems. So we have the capacity to do it with the number of persons we have in our region. So we have to start acting a lot closer and working together a lot more. And that's all I say.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. It has been mentioned by every single panelist this evening. We need to work together. That is the way to move forward. There's just no getting around it. We swim together or we sink by ourselves. I think that is something which has been established and which we need to work on. But that's our program, folks. We thank you, viewers, for staying with us for this edition of Time to Face the Facts. We have certainly learned a lot and heard a lot from our panelists this evening. And what we need to do is to take these ideas forward, to implement them. Some of them are quite easy, some of them we can do now. As they say, the difficult things we do now, the impossible will take a little longer. So let's all join together and work on what we have to work on to secure our region, to be able to feed ourselves beyond COVID and even within COVID as it is now. Thank you all, folks, and until next time, Evan Sinclair saying, so long.